What's up, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Bulls Latest. Your host, Matt Johnson here. I'm going to kick off today's show by talking about a report that Sports Illustrated threw out just a couple hours ago. The Warriors apparently turned down an Alex Caruso trade from the Bulls. At the time, the Bulls had sent him to the Oklahoma City Thunder. That is a huge story for Bulls fans. Obviously, Caruso was beloved here in Chicago, was a heck of a player, was an impactful player for this organization, and certainly has been an impact player for the Thunder, helping them to their first NBA title in franchise history. According to ESPN Shams Charania, the Warriors turned down a chance to acquire the now OKC Thunder star from the Bulls just a few seasons ago. Two of the most prominent stories throughout a relatively quiet NBA offseason were the respective contract stalemates between Jonathan Kuminga and the Golden State Warriors, and then Josh Giddey and the Bulls. Obviously, there was nearly a scenario where Kuminga could have ended up in Chicago himself a few years ago. I talked about that with you guys. The Bulls were kind of really looking at him as well. The Warriors offered Kuminga a similar contract to what the Bulls and Giddey agreed on. And Giddey, obviously, having his deal done now, the attention will turn to Jonathan Kuminga. And it's interesting because, the Warriors have offered him a similar contract and what Giddey agreed upon, but there was a team-friendly catch that was preventing an agreement from Kuminga. If you guys remember, this is something I talked about a while ago. There are a few details that Kuminga is unable to work out with Golden State at the moment, and they're not to his liking as it currently stands. So, just to give you an update on the Kuminga situation, late last week, Dunleavy, the GM of the Golden State Warriors, offered Kuminga a 3-year, $75.2 million deal with a team option in the third season. That's $48.3 million guaranteed in the first two seasons, and basically the same per year salary as fellow restricted free agent Josh Giddey and what he received. The difference here, and this is where it's going to get difficult for Golden State moving forward, is that it's half the length and it's got a team-controlled third season. And a subliminal understanding that the contract is more trade asset than commitment to a partnership. This is not what Kuminga is looking for. He feels like it's a disservice to what he's done for that organization. He wants more minutes. I mean, if it's me, I kind of take the offer and stick with what is one of the more perennial organizations in the NBA and has been for some time, really since Steph Curry came into the league, and then Klay Thompson, obviously Klay Thompson in Dallas now. But Golden State is a powerhouse. In a stacked Western Conference, they continue to find ways to compete. But if you're Kuminga in his camp, I totally get both sides here. He wants more of a commitment from the organization. One could say $48.3 million guaranteed is a lot of money, but in today's NBA, it is crazy the figures that are thrown around and the loyalty aspect that comes from it with these players and these organizations offering them what they think they deserve. So I'm just glad, honestly, and I'm sure a lot of Bulls fans are glad as well, assuming you wanted to keep getting around that we got a deal done, 4-year deal completed with Josh Giddey. Now we can move on and prepare for the opening of camp here in just a couple of weeks. So wanted to start today's show with that and just kind of throw that at you guys. I know Caruso was liked by a ton of Bulls fans, and he made a big impact here and won a lot of ball games with the Chicago Bulls team during his time. So just a quick thing to look back at. Kind of switching gears here to some Chicago Bulls free agents coming up in the upcoming off seasons and evaluating some of these guys. Now, I've done a ton of this already. I'm going to continue to kind of look upon these guys as we move into this next season and where things stand and where different scenarios are going to kind of take place. The Bulls must assess their soon-to-be free agents' trade values, and I think it's very important for any organization to kind of take a look at what you have, see what kind of value they bring, especially if you're not, chomping at the bit to win the Eastern Conference and to win an NBA championship. You've got to constantly kind of be evaluating what guys are worth. Obviously, and this is a guy I've talked about for months, since May, honestly, and that's Nikola Vucevic here, entering the final year of that 3-year, $60 million contract he signed in 2023. Vucevic may finally find some trade value here. However, the other impending free agents could also attract interest, albeit to varying degrees. And when you look at Chicago, their forthcoming trade deadline priorities should be crystal clear. Unlike years past, I mean, the Bulls are kind of, stuck between what they should do. I think they should have a very clear agenda agenda moving towards this upcoming trade deadline in February. The Bulls have routinely sat on their hands. Next season is the time to make moves, and I think they're going to. I have a hunch that the Bulls are going to be very active moving into this next trade deadline this upcoming year. Javon Carter and perhaps Jalen Terry may not register much interest in guys like that, but I think there are 3 or 4 guys on this roster that are going to, gain a lot of interest from contenders, and that's Collins. I think Collins is going to be a solid player this upcoming year, and he's going to build upon what he did coming over from that Levine trade from Sacramento. Obviously, a guy I've talked about a ton, Ayo Dosunmu. You got Kevin Huerter, who I think is going to draw interest as well, and then obviously Nikola Vucevic. So I think the most difficult one for me, and I think a lot of Bulls fans may agree on this, but it's parting ways with Ayo Dosunmu. That'd be the most difficult decision. But if he remains, drawing a ton of interest and similar interest to what Caruso did 2 years ago, he'd be worth the trade. Worth the trade. I think 2 or even 1 first-round pick in exchange for an expiring Dosunmu would absolutely be worth it. I think you get a first-round pick for him. That's a win in my eyes in the Bulls' book. And I think if you can gain 2 picks from that, that's a home run. So we'll see what the Bulls can do in negotiating that. But Ayo Dosunmu is a name that I've kind of been back and forth with. I would love to see him develop and stay here. He's been a heck of a story out of the University of Illinois, a hometown kid. So, hard to see him go, but sometimes you have to part ways with the emotion of it and do what's best for the organization. I think the Bulls in recent years, and this is something I've highlighted as a positive, given that there haven't been a ton in recent years, but the Bulls have done well clearing salary cap space ahead of a pivotal offseason coming up this next year, but they lack draft capital, and that's something that we've kind of seen in their inability to kind of stack draft picks. I think that's so important in building today's NBA roster. You see it less and less being molded around superstar talent and more around depth, and the Oklahoma City Thunder are a fantastic example of that. It's not that the team has traded away its own picks in the Bulls. They simply haven't acquired enough from other teams, and being a shortcoming that could be addressed at the 2026 trade deadline. I think there's enough assets on this roster, and I think there will be enough winning, going on early in the season to where these teams are going to want to, they'll be hitting the Bulls up on what these guys are what it's going to take to bring these guys in and what kind of value they hold in terms of what they want back. So Bulls are going to be involved in a ton of conversations with a lot of these guys. I think the 2026 trade deadline is going to be an exciting one for a lot of reasons. I'm optimistic that the Bulls are going to compete and win. Who knows how things are going to spin? I can't predict that for you guys, but if the Bulls start winning some games early on in the year and approach that February deadline kind of hovering a top 6 spot in the East, who knows? The Bulls could be buyers. I know that's not what Bulls fans want, but we'll see. I just wanted to kind of, go over that with you guys and how the Bulls could think about handling future free agents and what the mindset could be, and kind of get the Bulls fans, and the fan base in the right headspace moving into that part of the upcoming schedule here. We're still a long ways away. A lot could happen, but just something to keep your eye on if you're a Bulls fan following this team moving forward. So I wanted to kind of spin off of that. ESPN came out with a list of NBA future power rankings. And now, obviously, the Bulls, as you guys can guess, probably didn't do too well on this list. The Bulls came in at 28 out of 30 on this list, previously sitting at 25. This was broken down into a number of different categories. I wanted to go over this with you guys. I thought it was significant. The players of the organization, they ranked 28th, in the league here. I just think that, it's a tough look when you have a lot of moving pieces and really fail to choose a direction as an organization. Financially, they have the money element ranked at 4. I don't think that's a problem. And like I just went over with you guys with the future free agents, the Bulls are going to have a ton of money to spend in the 2026 offseason. That's not the issue. Draft capital, they're ranked at 8th. I think the Bulls are going to continue to collect draft capital and continue to build that part of their organization. As a market, they rank 12th. Not surprising. Chicago used to be one of the best markets for a free agent, more attractable than it is now. And it's kind of a shame because Chicago is such a solid sports city, unbelievable basketball culture here. As a market, it used to be top of the line. Now it's kind of middle tier. Hopefully it gets to work its way up to one of the more prominent basketball markets out there. this is where it kind of, I think, brought down the ranking. And I know it's not surprising to a lot of Bulls fans, but the management element of this ranking ranked the Bulls at 27th in the league. Just a failure to choose what they want to do. And a lot of those decisions come at questionable times. I mean, you have directions where you have Bulls, brass bringing in veterans over the years and then not choosing to rebuild this team properly. They're taking steps to do this. However, they're still holding on to a lot of these pieces. Like I just went over with these future free agents about, what are you going to do with these guys? What's the plan? And I think the management just is so unpredictable that's what ultimately puts the Bulls at 28 out of 30 in this future power rankings market that ESPN put out, because you just don't know what the Bulls' future is going to be. The Bulls previously ranked at 25th on this list. So in terms of wins, I mean, it's unlikely Chicago will finish this low after posting 40, 39, and 39 wins respectively over the last 3 seasons. They have been playing bound. They've done enough to stay competitive. Few teams currently have less hope of becoming a contender than the Bulls, if we're being honest here, who have prioritized competing in the play-in over grander ambitions. And I just think that is super obvious when you look at Chicago. Unfortunately, this new format has become all too comfortable for Bulls ownership and the front office. I think getting into that play-in tournament's become all too comfortable, something that I hope they break and choose one direction over the other here. Now, am I going to be one to sit here and say I don't want them to be in the postseason? Not at all. I love to see the Bulls compete in the postseason, but I mean, in terms of the new format, I want to see them, shoot higher. I want to see them shoot for greater ambitions here. And then, honestly, Chicago has gotten younger and has cap flex next summer, but how can we trust this organization right now to maximize that opportunity? And that's something that, has to be brought up. I think everything is in front of them more so than it's been in years past, but can we trust this front office and this organization who all just received extensions from the front office to make the proper decisions? And we can only keep our fingers crossed for that. I just thought that was an interesting list that ESPN threw out there in terms of future power rankings. The Bulls bumping down 3 spots from the previous ranking, not surprising at all. So we'll see. I got my fingers crossed for a great season ahead. I think a lot of things are in place. I think there are a lot of assets able to be shifted here for future assets for the Bulls, as I talked about. So kind of wrapping up today's show, we had a significant trade here. The Atlanta Hawks trade guard Kobe Buffkin to Brooklyn for cash considerations. Buffkin was, if you guys remember, Atlanta's 15th overall pick in the 2023 NBA draft. He's due $5.4 million this season and has a $6.9 million team option for 2026-27. So ultimately, the move opens up roster flexibility for the Hawks. Just looking at Buffkin as a player, he appeared in 27 games for the Hawks over the last 2 seasons and averaged 23.6 points a game while playing 14 games in the G League in 2023-24. So he's kind of struggled to get going. Brooklyn had a ton of draft capital, a ton of assets when it comes to spending. So not surprising that this Brooklyn team takes on another young player here. Brooklyn's going to be an interesting team to watch, as I've talked about really all the way since the draft happened. So we'll see what happens with that organization there. Anyway, I want to thank you guys for joining me today in another episode of Bulls Latest. Let me know what you think of those power rankings and what the Bulls should do at future free agents. How do you feel about that Caruso trade? I know a lot of you guys, I could guess at what you're going to say. It kind of stinks to see a guy who was such a prominent figure in Chicago for that short time and then goes and wins a ring with another young and upcoming organization in the Thunder. So anyway, thanks for joining me today, guys. Hit that like and subscribe button. Goes a long way for me and the channel. I really appreciate your guys' support on this show. We're right around the corner from some NBA basketball and from Bulls basketball, which I cannot wait for. Anyway, we will see you guys tomorrow, and thanks again for joining me.